So the next way we're going to learn how to solve quadratics is with factoring. So that's what you should be able to do by the time we get done with this lesson. So remember, a quadratic equation is one that can be written in the form ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0. And in the ones that we did yesterday when we solved with square roots, you did not have a b. So it just looked like ax squared plus c equals 0. And then you could get the x squared by itself and take the square root. Now if you have something that looks like x squared plus 2x minus 3 equals 0, you can't take the square root of this, because if you move this stuff over to the other side and try taking the square root, you have an x underneath the square root, which we can't do anything with. So we need another way to solve equations like this, and we're going to use factoring. Remember that there's 4 methods that we're going to use. The first one's square roots, second one's factoring, and then we'll do completing the square, and finally the quadratic formula. So in order to solve this stuff with factoring, we need to know something called the zero product property. 0 is just the number. Product, remember, means multiplication. And that's basically what this property says, that for every number a and b, if you multiply them together and they equal 0, the first one has to be 0 or the second one has to be 0. So stop and think about what that means. If you have 2 numbers, like x times y, and I tell you when they multiply together they give you 0, one of these numbers has to be 0. You could have like 3 times 0 or 0 times 8, but there's no other way to get 0 if 0 is not one of your numbers. Even if you do like 3 1/3, that's not going to give you 0. So when you have the zero product property, if you have 2 things being multiplied together, like these 2 factors here, and they equal 0, that means that you get to split them up and set them both equal to 0. And then they turn into linear equations that we know how to solve. So let's practice just the zero product property. So once you get it so things are multiplied together and they equal 0, you can split those things up. And x plus 7 has to equal 0, or x minus 4 could equal 0. So we can solve this one. All we got to do is subtract 7 from both sides. So one of our options is x could be negative 7, or add 4 to both sides. X could be 4. And we can check these answers and prove why this works. If you plug in negative 7, you get negative 7 plus 7 times negative 7 minus 4. Negative 7 plus 7 is 0. Negative 7 minus 4 is negative 11, but because you're multiplying by 0, you get 0. Or the other option is we could plug in 4. So 4 plus 7 times 4 minus 4. And you end up with 11 times 0, which again is 0. So those are the 2 options to make that equal 0. Now this next one is just a couple more steps, but not any more difficult. You have 2 things, they multiply together to make 0. So you can set them both equal to 0. And then you have a nice, easy linear equation to solve here. We'll add 5 to both sides, and then divide by 3. So one of my options is 5/3, or, this one's a little easier, 2. Those are the 2 things that I can plug into that equation and have it be true. So what you're going to start with is something that looks like this. We need to factor this, just like we did in Chapter 9, and then we can use the zero product property. So just like when we factored, always look for a GCF. That's the first thing you should do. And since these guys don't have anything in common, the next thing I'm going to do is find 2 numbers. They have to add to make the number in the middle, and multiply to make 1 times negative 48, which is negative 48. And if we go through and figure out what these numbers are, it's going to be 12 and 4, and 12's got to be negative. So I know my factors are x minus 12 times x plus 4. And all I did was rewrite that, because if I double distribute this out, I end up with x squared minus 8x minus 48. So it still equals 0. But now I have two things that are multiplied together and equal 0, so I can split them up. X minus 12 could equal 0, or x plus 4 could equal 0. We can add 12 to both sides, so there's one solution, or we can subtract 4 from both sides, and there's the other solution. And remember, when we're solving for things and we get answers like this, we can always check. So on a test or a quiz, you can know that you got this right. So plug it into the original equation and ask yourself, does it equal 0? If you do 12 squared minus 8 times 12 minus 48, does that give you 0? 12 squared is 144. 8 times 12 is 96, minus 48 more. If you throw that in a calculator, you definitely get 0. So that one works. We know 12 is good. We can do the same thing with negative 4. So negative 4 squared minus 8 times negative 4 minus 48. Does that equal 0? This is 16. This is 24. If you add these up, you get 48 minus 48, and that is definitely 0. So now that we know both of them work, those are the solutions that we have. Let's try one that's a little harder. 10x squared minus 13x equals 3. So the first thing you always need to look for is a GCF. Once you've done that, you want to make sure that your equation equals 0. Remember, it is the zero product property, so it has to equal 0. It can't equal 3. So the way to make it equal 0 is just to move this 3 over to the other side. So we end up with 10x squared minus 13x minus 3, and it equals 0. So now that we've made it equal 0, we've checked for a GCF, we get to factor. So we need two numbers. They got to add to make the number in the middle, and multiply to make 10 times negative 3. And those two numbers are going to be 15 and 2. We got to make 15 negative to make this work. So because there's a number out front, I'm going to rewrite this and then factor by grouping. So these guys have a 5x in common, and then I'm left with 2x minus 3. These guys have a 1 in common, and I'm left with 2x minus 3. And remember, this equation equals 0 the entire time. That's not changing. We're just changing the way that we're writing this equation. So then we can factor out the 2x minus 3, and we're left with 5x plus 1. And now that we finally have two things multiplied together, this 2x minus 3 and the 5x minus 1, and they equal 0, we can split them up and set them both equal to 0. So when we go to solve this one, we end up with 2x equals 3, and if we divide both sides by 2, 3/2 is one of our answers, or do some subtracting over here, and then divide again. Negative 1/5 works as well. So those are the two solutions. And remember, when we get to graphing, these are also the x-intercepts. It crosses the x-axis when x equals 3/2 and when it equals negative 1/5. So I left you two to try on your own. Remember that it has to equal 0 before you can do anything else. Write down any questions you have, and we can go over them in class. Enjoy your night.